So if the intro card wasn't enough, like I always say, please do not contact anyone, harass anyone. Honestly, don't even go to the article we're talking about. That's genuinely my ask of you. I know a lot of you are tired of hearing that. You're tired of the disclaimers. I am too. The problem is the way YouTube's terms of service are now written, it's very, very vague what you can and can't cover. And if, say, I don't do that, and then I have a subset of people who go and harass this person, even if this person comes off to me like not that intelligent, that is against terms of service because I didn't stop it or whatever, because I control all of you like a puppet master. So that out of the way, let's talk about this today. No, I'm not going back to covering these articles all the time because frankly, they're just too annoying and irritating. And I genuinely think they're bait. Like a lot of them I think are bait, which is why I have archived this. So if you want to read this without actually giving clicks to this website and impressions to them, you can. And it's not illegal. It's not piracy. It's nothing. It's the Internet Archive. So welcome to the Internet. Now, here's the thing with this. Spider-Man Remastered PC review. All sparkle, no substance. Looks great on PC and Steam Deck if you are okay with being a tool of the state. This is once again a thing with chronically online people needing to make everything about something in real life. Now, I know it is totally fine to have actual discussions about stuff like, so for, if I don't know, for example, Spider-Man was in Marvel Spider-Man, you know, the 2018 game, and he was like blatantly witnessing police brutality against a minority character, and he was like clapping and laughing and stuff. Okay, now we have like a reason to be like, this is bullshit. This is dumb. Like, this is obviously a connection to the real world that's distasteful and ridiculous. I am not against that kind of stuff. I think a lot of people think that I'm one of those people who's like, no politics in games, no politics in movies. I'm actually not. I think Star Trek has been effectively covering politics in different ways, including the police state, and different stuff like that forever. And dystopian type stuff with racial issues and other things. I think that something like Captain America, the Winter Soldier covered the surveillance state very well. But to insert that kind of stuff into Spider-Man is cringy. So one thing that they say is that, and despite its glossy sheen on 2 new platforms since its release, it hasn't aged well. In fact, its celebration of both the police and surveillance states is downright cringy today. Newcomers might expect, by the way, no one would expect this, some twist ending in which Spider-Man discovers and unravels systemic corruption. No one expected that. But Spider-Man is still just as surface level as the new coat of paint that this remaster offers up. There are criminals and there are civilians, heroes and supervillains, and nothing in between. This is actually like a really big misunderstanding of this game. And to me, I mean, I've never seen footage of this person playing this game. I'm hoping that this means that they never completed it, never completed the City Never Sleeps DLC, because a big point of this game actually is Silver Sable. Now, she's not the main character, but Silver Sable goes on to run, you know, Sable International, and there is a whole police surveillance state type thing in the game with this private military coming in and taking over New York for Mayor Osborn. Then, of course, if you've played the game, these are spoilers, by the way, the game's from 2018. I'm hoping that it's obvious that I'm spoiling things. But when you get further into the game, Sable actually realizes what's going on with Sable International, what's going on with her people, like with this mercenary private army being abused by Mayor Osborn and used for this surveillance state type thing to kind of crack down and run every aspect of citizens' lives to sort of impose martial law, and she actually rebels against it. And I don't know if the person who wrote this article understood that aspect of that or not, or even got that far into the game, but Spider-Man is also fighting against that the entire game. So for the early parts of the game, yes, you do help police in some instances, but it's worth noting that you actually only really directly work with like 2 police officers for the most part. Yuri and Miles' dad, Jefferson Davis, which has since been renamed in the comics, I believe, because Jefferson Davis was actually the name of a prominent Southern Confederate figure. So I don't really know how that ever kind of slipped through the cracks, but apparently that's been changed in the comics. But in the game, it's still Jefferson Davis, okay? So you work directly with those 2, and those 2 are shown directly to be good police officers at the time that you're working with them, right? Like Jefferson himself basically he attempts to sacrifice his life one time almost in order to save Spider-Man, and then he directly sacrifices his life to try and save civilians during the whole Mr. Negative Osborn mayoral campaign celebration of Davis bombing situation, which is where you start playing as Miles a little bit. So that is a police officer who's shown directly to be good. Now, they don't actually shine a good or bad light on most police officers in the game. Most of them are just viewed as neutral. You have very passive interactions with them that are neither good nor bad. There are some in which, like, there's even lines in here that I don't think are throwaway, where Spider-Man basically says, I better get out of here before the police show up because otherwise it's going to be a problem. Like, we know that this Spider-Man still is not on a positive note with most police officers. It's just they're not actively hunting him down because he makes their job easier. That's really all it is. I did want to talk about a couple things in here before going back to that point, by the way, not to pinball all over the place, but this review itself on Polygon is not necessarily bad, like in terms of the technical stuff. Like, I think sometimes I focus too much on just one aspect of an article or of a opinion, and I don't give any positives. And I've heard that before where it's like, you know, this person did make some good points in terms of the game. The person who wrote this article, the problem is that the backbone of the article is like an attitude of political insertion, like a self-insertion into the game of like, I have these problems in real life. And probably don't actually, because you're in a privileged position to be writing for Polygon and making money off of that and stuff like that. But anyways, I've perceived these problems in real life would be a better way to look at it. And therefore I need to self-insert that into the game. I need to like push my politics or political stance off into the game. That's kind of my issue with this kind of thing. When you look at the technical stuff in this article, I actually think it's well written. Like, I think this person's a good writer. Like, I'm being serious. I think they're a good writer. Talking about the Steam Deck, talking about how the game didn't play very well in terms of you have to do all these different things to get things to work with a USB-C adapter with the Steam Deck and other stuff where it's like not quite as straightforward as it would be just on PlayStation. That's a big PC gaming issue, by the way, people don't want to admit. It's not always just plug and play. A lot of times there are problems with compatibility with hardware or getting things to run or installing old DLL files that have to fix things with what the developers left up in the air. I had that situation a lot with the old Assassin's Creed games on PC. But that kind of stuff is actually very well written. And there was a section in here that I thought was really funny, not in a mean way, where it was actually talking about something that pisses me off to no end, which is audio delay. I hate audio delay and stuff. It doesn't ruin the game, but holy shit, it pulls me out of it, like, or pulls me out of a TV show when someone opens their mouth and says something and then it happens a fraction of a second later. Like, I can see that if it's too far off. I think anyone technically can. So this person talking about audio sync issues and stuff that needed to be patched, that kind of stuff, these are like very, very, very fair criticisms because this game shouldn't have launched with those problems. This game has been out for a handful of years and really does deserve that kind of being taken to task on that, okay? But when you start getting into the politics of this article, it's very, very annoying because they talk about how their former colleague wrote a whole thing about Spider-Man doesn't just help cops by catching armed robbers and putting deranged supervillains in jail. He helps them maintain a high-tech citywide surveillance network, blah, 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 talking about open-world RPGs where there's essentially, you know, this is an idea that kind of came in, I think, from Assassin's Creed in a lot of ways. You can correct me in the comments if you can think of a much better example of something earlier. That's the earlier example I can think of is Assassin's Creed 1, where you have these viewpoints. They open up the map, and then you're able to surveil the map and kind of see what's going on better. Spider-Man has that same kind of thing, except what it is radio towers that, I guess, monitor, like, the street-level communications in some ways. I'm not sure the depth to which they do that, but they are able to monitor and coordinate police efforts and kind of catch crimes as they're happening quicker. I'm not necessarily sure that they're like leaking the nudes of every private New York citizen like into the police database or anything crazy like that, but kind of going on to talk about how these towers reveal areas of the map to the players so they can keep going, but it isn't strictly a game mechanic. It's also a narrative choice, and one that comes with some pretty obvious real-life parallels. The NYPD buying cutting-edge equipment and software from a shady tech company owned by a billionaire with mechanical tendencies so they can monitor and collect data on citizens is a dystopian yet sensible video game plot, blah, blah, blah. And so the thing with that is, yeah, I agree with that. I mean, like, that's not really pointed as a positive. What Spider-Man does is he manipulates that system. That system's going to be brought back up either way. Essentially, that system is knocked out and the police are unable to coordinate in order to go after crime, so crime is rising. So what Spider-Man does in the game is he repairs that system, but he straight up hijacks it himself too, and uses it himself to get involved before the police even can in most instances. So it's not really like he's out here maintaining a police state tool on purpose to help the police. He's just using something at his disposal that will be back up anyway. I know that sounds like, when you get into the real world politics of this kind of stuff, that can sound like an excuse, and it's one that sadly people have used in history too often, of somebody else would have done it anyway. But the difference is Spider-Man didn't just repair the system and then leave. He straight up ties into the whole thing and uses it. And also they kind of get mad at him in this article about the whole Spider Cop gag where he's just making a joke. It's a little odd to me in this because they call him a willing tool of the state. This is a term that I think a lot of anarchists use, especially, and people who believe that there shouldn't be police, people who believe that there shouldn't be this state infrastructure a lot of the times. Now, I live somewhere where that's a very prominent attitude. Again, after everything that happened in Minneapolis, I live in Minnesota. There's a lot of that going on. However, when you actually look at the real life consequences of that instead of, and I think this is fair game. This person made it political, so we can talk a little bit about this. When you get into the real world circumstances and consequences of that attitude of, well, there shouldn't be a system, move the system away. You get into stuff like what happened with the no police zone in Minneapolis, where there are people dying and police can't help them. Now, it doesn't mean that, or paramedics can't even get there in some instances because they're blocked off and then people die. It doesn't mean that you have to trust everyone in the state. I don't trust all police. I've had bad experiences with some police officers. I've also had a few really, really good ones. And that's me, you know what I mean? Just like an average person. I'm sure people have had much worse experiences with some police than I have. 100%. There's like really bad ones out there. But Spider Cop has nothing to do with that. You know what I mean? Like, it has nothing to do with this almost anarchist view of the police where like they have to be gone. Not reformed, but gone. It just doesn't. What it has to do with is old serial television, which I think people who are more over the age of 20 should understand. Perry Mason, Matlock, you know, the Andy Griffith Show, this kind of stuff. These old serialized TV shows that are not necessarily like police good. They're like a detective in the city, or like a lawyer in the city works together with a detective to find this crime, blah, blah, blah. It's like a weekly television series that was supposed to be fun for people. It wasn't a real life thing, even if it did use some real life elements, the same way Spider-Man is. They keep going on and on about this whole thing in terms of bringing it back up over and over. And it's kind of bizarre to me because it's not like a problem with the writing. Like, they don't talk about how it's poorly written. They don't talk about how it's, you know, like written in a way where Spider-Man doesn't think. They don't talk about that kind of stuff at all. They just keep bringing up the police and keep bringing up that kind of stuff, going on and on in terms of talking about how Spider-Man works with the police throughout the entire game, and the cops' widespread surveillance of the city is presented as a useful resource. Spider-Man isn't a do-gooder kid from Queens helping out his community so much as a willing tool of the state. This was weird in 2018, and critics pointed out at the time. By the way, they didn't. A few did, who just insert this kind of stuff into the game or into the movie or stuff like that. Like, it's just the way it is. Most normal people don't notice this kind of stuff. Like, they just don't look for something to be mad about in a game. It's just if it plays bad, if the narrative is badly written, stuff like that, they notice it. But they don't go in like, all right, how does this relate to good old Orange Man? I haven't gotten mad in about 30 minutes, so let's see if I can find an Orange Man parallel. Norman Osborn, he's Orange Man? You know what I mean? Like, nobody gets into this kind of stuff and, like, really digs into it and looks for it. I'm a liberal arts degree major. You know what I mean? Like, I'm a writer degree major, teacher degree major. And I'm the type of person who is encouraged to look for that kind of stuff in college. And I don't. You know why? Because when you self-insert and look for these things and everything, you'll find it. Like, and this goes for both types of people, by the way. I've seen the same kind of thing now with Prey, the new Predator movie, where it's a lot of like bullshit where like, oh, it's woke. A lot of people overusing the word woke. And then when you get down to the nitty gritty of why they actually think that, it's because it's a girl who's the main character and because she's strong. And it's like it's the same thing on both sides. Because I've gotten people before who have pointed out, like, you don't point it out on the other side. You know, I'm kind of starting to, because like for a while to me, it wasn't as noticeable. Like a lot of times the stuff that people called woke or overly political or stuff like that it was a lot of self-insertion writing that was just unnecessarily comparative with the real world, where like every time there was a villain who had money, it had to be the Orange Man, or every time there was some kind of police type thing in the universe, it had to involve police brutality and stuff like that. It's not that you can't cover that stuff, but a lot of times when that stuff was called out for being dumb, it was dumb, no matter what side of anything you were on, because it just didn't need to be that way. And it's not that you can't cover that stuff. Metal Gear Solid covers that kind of stuff very well. It's just that it does so intelligently and with some tact and some class. That's the kind of stuff I ask for from my fiction. Not everything is woke. Not everything is right-leaning either, where it's like pro-state, pro-police, pro-whatever. I think these kinds of breakdowns of the world and of games and movies and fiction and stuff, I think they're actually genuinely harmful. I think articles like what's written by this author, they just go to further divide the United States at the very least, which is already an extremely divided country, angry about everything all the time. And I'm tired of seeing it. That's why I make fun of it when it happens. That's why I call it out. I understand some people think it's me trying to be political. It's genuinely not. I don't like politics. I don't like extremes. Okay, if I need to say that a billion times, I will. I hate extremists on either side of anything, okay? If you're an extreme right wing or extreme left wing and you can't open your mind and think and absorb some new information, ask questions, challenge your own worldview, see things without self-insertion too. I don't like that. I don't like that stuff. I don't like the things that come with the extremes on either political side or any of that crap. Like, it's almost always bad. I've almost never seen an extreme that is good. It's just not something you really see examples of. But to like constantly put this stuff off on media and constantly say like, well, I noticed like one thing here, so therefore it must be this. This kind of stuff is obnoxious, annoying, and I think the general public is tired of it. It's another thing if it's something like the new Star Wars show where like it genuinely, I think Andor, it's genuinely being compared where like the one of the themes of it is supposed to be like a post-Orange Man type utopia or state or whatever, that kind of stuff. Like when you start getting into this and the writers are self-inserting these kinds of narratives, that's annoying. I think that's fair to call out. But like when you're just getting into Spider-Man and he helps a couple of cops out and makes a joke about serialized detective television and stuff like that, and you're not acknowledging things like the Silver Sable through line in the story, where you meet Sable, she actually becomes anti-police state, and you work with her to help bring down some of these things. And then, of course, they show kind of the abuse of power, which if we really want to read into this stuff and kind of put real-world politics into it, they almost show like a post-CIA, post-United States military world where like you have terror groups who get a hold of their weaponry because they were supplied with it. We have that in the DLC. If you really want to get into these real-world politics and try and insert this stuff, fine. Look at Hammerhead's crew. Look at them. Look at the mob getting this Sable tech and using that police surveillance state to destroy New York. That is almost a real world comparison to what happened in the Middle East in certain areas where the United States armed rebels, and then those rebels eventually turned on them and sort of formed some of the first terror cells that still affect the world today. If we're reading all this stuff, like I can do this too. That's what I'm saying. I can do this too. And that kind of stuff disproves this point. So if you want to do that kind of stuff, you have to be fair and even-handed across the board. You have to look into Sable International. You have to look into Hammerhead. You have to look into what Spider-Man's actually doing and saying, how he gets away from the police a lot of times before they show up. Yes, they don't directly attack him when he does show up. That's not a mechanic. But he doesn't stick around usually to talk to them. That's a part of the game and something he says after crimes that you stop in the game. So when we're getting into this kind of stuff, if you are going to self-insert these things, you have to be fair. You have to do it on both sides. You have to take a more center take and not just push your far-leaning shit off on everyone else who's reading your site, just wanting to know if the game's good or bad on Steam Deck or PC. Nobody is reading this article wanting to know about the police state. They're just not. Maybe the 10 people who are lunatics and should really go outside and touch grass and get some help. But nobody else is. They just don't care. We want to know if it runs well, if it doesn't run well, if the narrative is poorly written, if there's stutter and audio sync, etc. And when you write that stuff here or anywhere, it's well written. These authors, they're not incapable of writing. That's something that I think a lot of people do, is they hit them with this criticism of like, they can't write. No, it's not that. I genuinely don't believe it's that. What I believe it is that a lot of these video game authors and games journalists and entertainment journalists, what they really wanted to do is cover something that they believe matters. And where fiction matters to us, stories matter to us, and they impact our lives directly and affect us on a deeper level, to them, it doesn't matter. What matters is the politics. What matters is the underlying stuff that they put into the game. Not that's there, that they insert into the game. They want to be political activists. They want to be political writers and journalists and stuff like that. They want to go work for CNN or on the other side Fox or whatever, and they can't get that job, so they're stuck as a games journalist and they got to complain about something somewhere to feel like they're making a difference. That's what it is. Now, do I think I'm making a huge difference complaining about this? No. I just think it's dumb, and if we have the, if this person has the right to self-insert police state BS into Spider-Man, probably one of the most apolitical games I've ever seen in my life, I have a right to bitch about it too. So welcome to the internet. This is fair use, and criticism is a thing that exists. So as always, my last thing, don't contact them. Please do not. If you do, I told you not to, okay? This can be pointed to multiple times throughout the video, YouTube. I always say don't mess with people. Don't harass people. Don't give them the attention or time of day they need. These kind of bad takes should be made fun of. To quote what this person said in the article in terms of about the article, I think all this stuff makes a serious moment unintentionally funny. You're trying to be deep, you're trying to be serious, but it just comes off cringe, in my opinion. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. Please be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed it. Thank you so much to my patrons. I'm going to leave a thing here thanking my patrons. You guys are helping us out a lot. We've had a rough few months on YouTube, and you guys are here helping us. If you do want to get involved in supporting the channel in any way, watching the videos helps me a ton, subscribing helps me a ton, leaving likes, commenting, letting me know your opinion, whether you agree or disagree with me, helps me a lot. And also following over on social media. We have Twitter, we have a thriving Discord community, of course, we've got a Facebook, I've got TikTok channels up, I have a secondary channel, Degenerate Plays, where I play through a ton of games, hang out with you guys. There's lots of stuff down there. And finally, last but not least, is my wife Jill's Etsy shop, where she sells all kinds of fun and wonderful stuff, from jewelry to knickknacks to, starting soon, personalized pet paintings, which I can never say correctly, which are very, very beautiful, coming soon. They are going to be a more cartoony style of your pets, and they are very reasonably and affordably priced compared to other ones on the market. We looked at the market and we slashed the price to make it, one, this is full transparency, still profitable, but two, a good deal for you if you ever want a picture of your pet. So my wife Jill is a fantastic painter, and of course my best friend in the whole world. I love her, so please check that out. Like and subscribe, and have a fantastic day. And as always, everyone, stay shway.